Hello everyone, this is a video here to show you how to install Oracle VirtualBox. A lot of classes right now may require some software that is specific to a particular operating system, most notably Windows. You don't necessarily see anything that's particular to the Mac or you're using a Mac, but you'll see programs that require Windows, and 50% of most college students, university students at either undergraduate or graduate level are running either a Mac or even a Linux box. So you may be using Ubuntu Linux or Debian Linux. What I want to show you here is how you can install VirtualBox. I'm using a Mac right now, but the instructions will basically be the same whether you have a Windows computer or a Linux computer. Basically, the steps are pretty easy. What we're trying to do is, again, simulate another machine on our computer. So if you have a Mac, we may want to put on a Windows type of operating system. So we run our Mac, and then we'll run the Windows inside of the Mac while the Mac is running. Or we're running our Linux box, and we want to run Windows inside of that Linux box so that we could just use our piece of software. Now, you need to note that it's going to be slower than actual if you had a Windows machine running, because it's sharing resources, but it's usually good enough to handle almost anything that you need. So the steps are very simple. We're just going to download Oracle VirtualBox from virtualbox.org/wiki/downloads, and you're going to take whatever the latest stable version is, and I'm going to show you how to figure that out. You're going to run the installation, so when it downloads, you basically double click it if it's an executable or if it's a DMG for Mac. And if you're running a Linux box, then you're probably using the apt-get installation procedure, which I'm not going to show you. And then we're going to configure it. Most of the video will be really focused on how do we configure that. The thing that you will need is you're either going to need an installation CD of Windows or whatever operating system you want. You're either going to need a CD for Windows, or you're going to need what's called an ISO image, and this is a file that you download for the operating system. Now, Windows you have to purchase. If you're using Linux, you can download it from, say, Ubuntu, and I'll show you what that looks like so that I can show you how to do the installation process and how to set everything up and actually run through it. So let me show you exactly how we go about this. So you can see here, I'm on the browser, I'm at virtualbox.org/wiki/downloads, and you're going to see these things called the binaries. What you're going to do is, if you have a Windows box, you're going to download the VirtualBox, whatever the latest version is for Windows hosts. If you have a Mac, you'll download it for OS X hosts. If you're actually on a Linux box, you'll download it for the Linux hosts. You can do this, or actually you'll do a different method, and if you're familiar with Linux, you'll know how to do that automatically. So once you download it, the actual file will be saved into your browser, and then what you're going to do is you're just going to execute it and run it. And you can install it wherever you want. Now, this is a normal installation procedure. Normal installation procedure, so you can just execute it, run it, let it install in whatever directory it wants to, and then proceed with configuring it. So I'm going to let you do that, download it, and install it, and then the rest of this video will focus on how to do the installation. So at this point, I've already installed Oracle VirtualBox, and I have already 3 machines that are configured. In this case, I have an Ubuntu Linux, I have a Debian Linux Raspberry Pi, I have a Windows box as well. And what it's doing is it's creating a single file on your computer so that when you actually run it or start it using the button up here, it will actually pull that file up and run Windows or Linux inside of a window within your computer, in this case within my Mac. What we are going to do is I'm going to show you how to configure this. It's very easy to do. You're going to need either an ISO image or the Windows CD or DVD, and I'll explain that in a moment. Basically, what you're going to do is we're going to click New, and this is where we begin to give it the name. So we're going to give this machine a name, and I can call this whatever I want. I can call this Hofstra Windows PC, and then the type would be Windows, and it could be XP, or it could be any other version. So you'll need to match the version appropriately, and that's important. Or I can call it Hofstra Linux, in which case I'm going to choose my Ubuntu 64-bit Linux, and I'll continue from there. So I'm going to actually use the Linux example because I don't have a Windows CD handy, but it's the same basic process, and I'll explain the one difference that's there so that you'll be able to do that. So we click Continue, And now we're asked for the memory size. This computer has 4 GB of memory. So your computer may have 2, it may have 4, it may have 8. And what you're going to do is you're going to say that when this computer runs, I'm going to allocate a certain amount of RAM to that VirtualBox. The more RAM you give it, the better, more performance you get, the faster it will be, and it will just be easier to run. But you can really only go up to about halfway, so a little bit more. It's got to be within the green area. So I'm going to basically give it 1/2 of my full memory and click continue. Then what it's going to do is it's going to say, well, we need to create a hard drive. And you say, well, I already have a hard drive. What we're doing is we're actually creating a file on the hard drive that this virtual computer will use, and it will act as a hard drive. What we're going to do is pretty much create a virtual hard drive right now. You could do don't add, you can do use an existing, but my recommendation right now is just create a virtual hard drive because you're trying to create one. It will then ask you what type is this going to be. You're going to choose the VirtualBox disk image. Unless you know any of these others, I wouldn't suggest using them. VDI is the standard, and it will create a VDI file on your computer. So .VDI, you'll be able to find that on your computer. So we click continue. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say whether it's dynamically allocated or fixed size. Dynamically allocated will basically fill up the drive as it's needed. So it's not taking up, let's say if you set it to be 30 gig or 40 gig, it won't basically allocate all 40 gig right away. If it's a fixed size, it will literally allocate all 40 gigs, so you'll have a 40 gig file sitting on your computer. So it kind of uses up space as well as it begins to take up. It takes a little bit longer to create. So I would suggest making it dynamically allocated, especially for a first procedure. So now please type in the name of the new virtual hard drive. You can call it Hofstra Linux. You can add anything you want. You can basically locate it anywhere you want on your computer. It could be on any specific drive. And then I can allocate how much space I want. I can basically make it 8 gig, 15 gig, 5 gig, whatever you want and whatever is appropriate. Again, you will probably need a minimum of 4 gig to 8 gig for Windows, so you might want to make it 12 to 15 or 16 gig of hard drive space if you're going to run an application. So it really depends on what you're running. That you'll have to kind of figure out. It's safe to say 20 and 30 gig VirtualBox drives will probably be good enough. Now you may ask, well, can I expand it later? You really can't expand the drive, but what you can do is you can add another drive later. There's a way to do that. But for now, we'll just say that you'll create a 20 gig or 10 gig. Let's do it this way. I'll leave it at 10.7 gig just to create it. Okay, once that's done, you will see this Hofstra Linux, or you'll see your Hofstra Windows box, and everything is ready to go. Now, unfortunately, we haven't installed the operating system, so that's the next thing that we have to do. What we basically are going to do, and we have different options here, but we're going to click on storage. We click on this item, and we click on storage. When we click on storage, we'll get another window. And you'll see that we have this little thing for the IDE and SATA, S-A-T-A. Don't worry about what they mean. It doesn't really matter. But here, what we're going to try and do is we're looking for a disk image that has the installation. Now, what I'm going to do is I have an ISO image, so I'm going to basically choose the disk, and you will see here raw ISO image. Let me just do that one more time so you can see what I did. I'm trying to, the ISO image is going to be the same thing as my CD or DVD that has the installation disk. So I'm going to basically click the little circle with the plus, and this will basically say you're about to add a CD to this computer. Okay, would you like to choose a virtual disk or put the disk in the drive? I'm going to choose the disk, and then I'm going to find it. So if you have a DVD that's put in maybe on your Mac for the devices, you can choose that. If I have an ISO, which I do on my downloads, I can basically choose, on my desktop, I downloaded the Linux, so I can choose that. I click open. And now this Ubuntu drive is basically ready to go. If it was your Windows disk, you would add that there, and it would basically use that for the installation. So now I'm going to basically click OK. Once that's done, I now know that it's connected to it. I will then click Start on that computer. So now it's starting. and now it's going through the installation process. And if it's Windows, you'll see the Windows logo and everything else that's associated with it. And so basically, that's it. If you're not sure how to download the ISO for Ubuntu, basically you can go to ubuntu.org for the downloads. So we could do Ubuntu, and we basically can do download. And then you can basically find the appropriate download that you want for your Ubuntu machine. For Windows, you'll need the CD, so you can do the installation off of that as it's doing the install. As you can see, it says it's running. To close out the machine, once it's installed, you can then run it. You don't need that DVD or CD anymore. You can just operate it like you normally do. You do a shutdown on that virtual instance, and you're all set. I'll show you how the my Windows box works. What I'll do is I will close this Ubuntu. Yeah, when I close the window, it's going to say, do you want to save the machine state, power off the machine, send the shutdown signal. Saving the machine state will leave you in the exact spot that you were in. So if you're kind of working and you kind of want to just close it down, you can literally save the machine state. It'll save exactly where you were so that when you start it up again, it will resume at that spot. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to power off the machine. Now it's closed and says it's powered off. I'm going to run my Windows. I just double clicked on that icon and basically comes up, well, and now you can see it'll bring up the Windows box and everything will be installed. So that's pretty much it for for using VirtualBox. And then once you start it, you can install your software the same way that you normally would on any other box. Now, not all software, because of license keys, will run, or you'll only get certain applications like Minitab, I know, doesn't allow you to really run under VirtualBox. Others really don't, but most applications will run on VirtualBox. And some of the most common things to do are to install multiple versions of different operating systems because you're trying to test or play around with certain pieces of software like a Mongo database or MySQL database or anything else with regards to software. Or if you have a Mac and you need to really run Windows, the version of Windows Excel, you can do that and you won't have a problem. Hopefully this answered all of your questions.